Hello, friends. It's the Carnivore Rabbi here, as always, to meet, pray, and love together. And fasting is a very difficult topic for many. I remember when I started the carnivore diet, my wife was not enthused about it, but she understood, and had a pretty easy time persuading her it was a good idea to try. But when I mentioned I wanted to do intermittent fasting, she immediately said, "Absolutely not. It's horrible. You'll starve to death. You'll get sick." It was triggering. And I think that's not unusual. Even though, of course, we fast on several Jewish holidays, most notably Yom Kippur. We fast for a day to be closer to God, and fasting is a core part of many religions. Yet, in our culture, fasting can trigger some real negativity. And I want to address a couple of interesting issues. The first issue is fasting necessary on the carnivore diet? And the reason that's a question a lot of people ask is the two often go together. Sometimes people who are major advocates of the carnivore diet also encourage fasting, intermittent fasting especially, but even longer fasts. And fasting can be healing. So people who are interested in health often come across fasting. People like Dr. Jason Fung, who's written extensively about it. So it's an issue that is out there, and many people wonder about it. I generally side with Dr. Chafee, who says fasting really isn't necessary on the carnivore diet. It's not terrible, it can be very positive. But carnivore is a fasting mimicking diet. He's talked extensively about this. A lot of the benefits we get from fasting, especially autophagy, which is the death and then renewal of certain cells, so the regenerating cells, you get from the carnivore diet because you're not feeding carbs to your body. So a lot of the benefits we get from the carnivore diet, same benefits we'd get from fasting. And I've noticed that to be true. I've done a couple of fasts, and while you feel good doing it after a while, it doesn't really change anything. It's not significantly better than the feeling I get just sticking with the carnivore diet. But then there's another level to fasting that is very interesting, and that's the spiritual level. And of course, as I said earlier, fasting is a core part of many religions. And I've been fasting pretty much since I was an adult, since I became a bar mitzvah on Yom Kippur. And the reason it's a part of Judaism, and I think a part of other religions, is it creates a closeness between you and God. You are not using any outside stimulation to become who you are. Nothing gets between you and our Creator, the physical and the spiritual. And so fasting gets you in that state of mind, both physically and mentally. And I think that's part of its benefit. And it also reminds us that we are fully complete. God created us with so many incredible qualities, or we evolved with so many extraordinary qualities that we can leave aside addressing all of our physical needs for a day and focus solely on our spiritual needs and our spiritual relationship. That is a powerful feeling. That is uplifting. That is inspiring. And to me, there's a tremendous benefit in doing it. Not all the time, not frequently, but on special occasions. It can be cleansing and nurturing and powerful. And I often do one meal a day. I'll fast for about 24 hours, and that is very powerful as well. It at least gives me a certain perspective that I'm not dependent on food to address my spiritual needs, which is often part of the addiction, part of the reason people get so addicted to carbs, because they are addicting, and also because it addresses our emotional needs. And there is something powerful about turning to God and turning to faith to address those needs deeply. The other thing that fasting does, and this is something I've spoken about before in sermons and things like that, is in Judaism, the day of Yom Kippur, which is the major fast, it's also a day when we imagine our own death, when we are no longer here. And we ask ourselves if we would be proud of the life that we lived. That ends now is a way of separating from our physical being and residing in our spiritual being, the one that lives forever. And as that spiritual being, we look back at our physical being and say, are we proud of what happened? And to me, that's the essential question. That's the drive for the carnivore diet. We are trying to live our best life possible. And fasting reminds me to ask that question. It puts me in that spiritual realm where we ask the things that really matter. We often don't do that in day-to-day life, but when we take that time to step back from our normal routines, we can ask those more difficult questions and more powerful questions, and the questions, the urgencies, the concerns that drive us to do the carnivore diet, so that we can add more life to our years, so that we can live with great meaning and purpose. And one of the beautiful things about the carnivore diet is that it makes fasting much easier. I found that I began to naturally intermittent fast. My wife scared me off a little bit, so I didn't do it at first. But then it just came naturally. And how powerful is that? That really tells us something about why this is the proper human diet. Because we know that hundreds of years ago, people didn't have access to foods 24/7 at 7-Eleven. People naturally fasted and feasted. And so we are to that natural order, that way God made us, so that we can live with greater happiness and purpose. So it's not necessary, it's not critical, I don't think, but it can be something that can be spiritually cleansing and uplifting.